Joining me today are Dr. Shabnam Kadir from the University of Hertfordshire, Professor
Hello.
Thomas Nowotny, Professor of Informatics at the University of Sussex, and Dr. Christoph Metzner, postdoctoral researcher at the Technical University Berlin and Charité Universitätsmedizin. So I would give a very brief introduction about what we're doing here today, and afterwards give the speakers the chance to introduce themselves and finally proceed with the main discussion of the panel. So first of all, thank you all for joining us today. As we all know, neuroscience is an incredibly active research field, and I think what makes it particularly special is the fact that it is also very interdisciplinary, with many different approaches imported from various other fields aimed at basically cracking the mysteries of the brain. But in this context, it is also important to sometimes engage in a more conceptual analysis of the field as a whole and see whether we can, first of all, define some general goals for our work. And of course, by extension, whether we can critically evaluate which of the current hot topics and approaches and methods in neuroscience can take us there, and whether there are any underrated approaches we should consider, and finally, what obstacles we might encounter along the way and how should we go about overcoming them. This is what our discussion will focus on in the next hour, and as usual, I would like to encourage our audience to address questions to our speakers throughout the discussion. This time we will answer them in between. And now I would like to invite our panelists to briefly introduce themselves and their work. And I don't know, perhaps Shabnam, would you like to start? Or
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me to this panel. So you talked about interdisciplinary work. So my background was actually in mathematics and theoretical physics. So my PhD is actually in string theory, so many years ago in my former life. And then after, say, 6 years of maths postdocs in Germany, I decided I wanted to do something that was more impactful towards the world, perhaps. And I changed to computational neuroscience. So string theory had the big holy grail questions about the origins of the universe that attracted me. And as we all know, the brain has about 86 billion neurons. And so the holy grail questions of neuroscience also drew me in. So now I started off doing some work on things that people need in neuroscience, like spike sorting algorithms, things like this. And then when I started my own group in Hertfordshire, we're trying to use methods from my previous life, maybe bits of topology, to also apply those tools to help understand the brain, particularly in things like, well, currently I'm working on a project looking at schizophrenia, for example, and also, you know, something as diverse as, say, art appreciation, which is also a nice project that I might mention later. So anyway, thank you.
thank you very much. That's very impressive. All right. Who should go next? Perhaps Thomas, would you like to follow?
Absolutely, no problem. Yeah. So interestingly, I also have a theoretical physics background. So my PhD was on random field Ising models, so looking at interaction of random fields and magnetism in a quite theoretical way. And I had the same idea to change to something that was more impactful and more active and less niche than what I was doing at the time. But this was a long time ago now, and since then I've done different things in neuroscience. I've for a while worked on insect olfaction, and we still continue to do so. We've also worked on dynamic clamp experimentation, where we couple computational models, as most of you will know, with living tissues or individual neurons, and try to combine the computational and the experimental. And when we talk about interesting areas and so on, we might come back to that occasionally. And then most recently, I've also been very excited about taking more inspiration from neuroscience and make a better AI. And mostly, again, focused on insects, because I have always had the idea that the brains are so much smaller, it must be easier to understand them. However, after 15 years of doing that, I'm not 100% sure anymore. Actually, it's more 20 years now. I'm not 100% sure anymore whether fewer neurons actually makes it simpler to understand it. So that's something we can discuss later as well. And I'll stop there for now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Christoph?
Yeah, so I don't have a physics background, but I do have a math background, so also similar to Shabnam. So I did algebraic number theory, and as both of you also felt that, well, I want to do something less niche and like more, more interactive with different types of people, different types of research. So I also switched to neuroscience then for my PhD. And so I've mainly focused on working like in computational psychiatry, so looking at sensory processing deficits, information processing deficits in psychiatric disorders, mainly schizophrenia. And I've worked on models, or am working on models from like very detailed single cell models of, let's say, layer 5 pyramidal cells. That's one current project, to models of like, well, whole brain models, or let's say models of the whole cortex, where you represent then the regions with neural mass models, then trying to understand the large scale patterns. And also, well, one of the main focuses of my research is to understand kind of what these different types of neurons do or contribute towards certain functions and towards activity, with a special focus on interneurons. That's also kind of comes with the computational psychiatry focus, because in psychiatric disorders, we see deficits in various types of these inhibitory interneurons, for example. So, yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. So you all have basically a hard science background, math, physics, but you also work on somewhat, to some extent, different areas of research. So I'm really curious, and I would like to open the discussion with the first main question for today. And that is from the perspective of your research and of your background as well. What would you say that is the overarching goal, or goals, plural, of neuroscience? And perhaps are we even at the point where we can actually define such a big direction for the work?
Yeah, should we just get going in a random order? Thank you for passing on the questions up front, so we have a few moments to kind of collect ideas. And when I thought about it, I think the main fascinating driver for me is still the idea that we want to eventually understand how brains work. How does intelligent behavior arise from the matter of the brain that consists of many neurons that interact with each other in some ways? And I think this kind of fundamental understanding, I think, is still one of the main drivers, and we shouldn't forget about that. But that being said, it's very important to find then directions where that helps us solve problems that we currently have, for example, with disorders, as Christoph was pointing out. And I think it's very helpful then to think also about priorities in the way where that also takes foreground, and we solve problems first that might have relevance in medical applications and similar. And as a third prong, maybe that's specific to me, but maybe it's a more general thing. I do like the idea of looking at the brain very closely again to make better AI. And just to motivate that a tiny bit, there are many estimates out there what it costs to train one of these large language models. But one of them is that you need about, for one training of GPT-3, you need about the energy consumption of 60 average households in the UK, the annual energy consumption of 60 average households in the UK, which is a lot of energy. And then if you compare the brain, it's been estimated generally about 15 watts of power. And even if you trained it lifelong, you wouldn't get the same kind of energy measures. So we have something where the brain is clearly better in some ways, even though there are machines playing better chess and better Go. But in terms of energy consumption, the brain is so much more efficient than any of the computer solutions we have. And I find that's a very interesting third angle where there's clearly something we need to be able to learn still from the brain to make computing better, to make AI better. But I stop there and let the others come in for a moment.
Well, maybe coming to that point. So, yeah, I mean, of course, if a 20-watt brain learns over lifetime, that's less energy than training GPT. But I mean, to be a fair comparison, wouldn't you have to factor in the energy cost of evolution? Because I think,
yeah, but that's only partially a fair point, because you can, of course, do something like artificial evolution, and it's not being done. So maybe that's
okay, true. Yeah, maybe
part of the answer. Yeah, but then we would have to understand either how to do the evolution or what the relationship of what the evolution produced with the effective computing is, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
And it's also less training as well. I think if you look at who was it, Lee Sedol, the AlphaGo champion, if you say estimate how many games has he played in his life, maybe something like, if he trained from a child, 50,000 games perhaps, you know, whereas AlphaGo had to be trained on millions just to, and with, you know, how much more, I don't know, it was several thousand times more than a 20-watt brain or whatever someone might have. So that's also another thing. Even, okay, maybe we have to put some of that into what the human evolution was contained within those 5 million. Even allowing for that, I think
but but I
mean,
guess
it doesn't.
Yeah, go ahead, Christoph.
No, I mean, it of course, your point still stands that, well, we had these years of evolution, and we have the end product, our brain, and so we can draw inspiration from that for AI. That, I mean, yeah, absolutely. So,
yeah.
Perhaps on this topic, we also have a question from the audience, which I think would also touch upon the next main question of the panel. And that is, what are the implications of neural network models and computational approaches in deciphering the brain's complexities, and how do they contribute to our understanding of brain neurological functions?
Yeah, very interesting question. Thank you very much. I think there are different levels here. So to knock on the more controversial right from the beginning, so there are people who do these direct comparisons, particularly in the visual system, between deep convolutional networks done for computer vision and the visual stream in the human brain. And they find certain representational similarities between certain layers in one and the other. I personally think that's interesting, and I do believe that it is significant in the sense that it is not completely random, but I'm not 100% sure whether that tells us a lot about the similarity between the systems, because we, on the other hand, already know that they're working quite different. I mean, we know that the one is feed-forward, the artificial one is feed-forward, whereas the brain clearly works a lot with feedback, even more maybe with feedback than with feed-forward kind of connections. And so if one already knows they're different, then to find some similarity is kind of a bit so in the middle in my mind. But the other one I would say is that we have the tools from AI now to actually ask questions about the brain and use it as a research method if you want. And I think that's the more interesting bit for me, where there's many things we can do now with computer vision, looking at brain imaging and automatically segmenting all individual neurons. And there's loads of technology now where we can learn so much more about the brain than before. And I think that will accelerate progress a lot.
I don't know if I can just add to what Thomas just said. So he mentioned you mentioned AI models so we also, I mean, yeah, it's very useful that we the way many AI models work are very different from the way human brains work. So, for instance, everyone has perhaps now seen the classic thing in which you add a tiny bit of noise to a picture of a panda and you end up labeling it. Well, you can give it almost any label you want, a baboon or God knows what, a dog or something like that. So, so you think you know, you've set up this system and you think you know how it's classifying what a panda looks like, but actually, you know, you've got no idea. There are various theories that come from studying such systems, like, oh, perhaps it relies more on texture than the human brain does in some bizarre way. So that reveals things about it. Coming back to the main question, I think there is just so many different questions and ways of tackling things. So in neuroscience itself, people are now looking at, I don't know, like a periodic table of cell types, looking at different cell types and what they do. We haven't even got to, you know, we haven't finished that sort of classification, or even if such a classification can be achieved, like, you know, you could say, okay, but then all of this stemmed from evolutionary principles, right? Okay, so is it actually meaningful to make a classification or a detailed classification of thousands of different cell types? And then underlying that, you also have the genetic things that you know, which genes are turned on in which portion of the brain, even if the cell is the same type by some other definition of morphology. So, and then there are, God knows, order of magnitude 100 billion of them, and then trillions of connections between them. And yes, there's a lot of work on connectomes. At the moment, it seems to be a kind of golden age where AI or machine learning techniques are sort of, you know, kind of giving sustenance to neuroscience, and also maybe the other way around. With regard to my background, I'm also interested in perhaps using the potential of other less used aspects of mathematics, like persistent homology or homology. So this is some of this, you know, computational topology really took off around 2005. So before that, you'd have mathematicians sitting around doing their theorems on bits of paper. And now you're seeing this new field emerge that is also a new lens on tackling data. So I'd like to just quickly mention a very nice result which came from mathematicians with a topologist lens looking into neuroscience. So we've all heard of these place fields that are hippocampal place fields. And if you show hippocampal place fields to a mathematician who's never done any neuroscience before, they say, oh, wow, that looks like open sets covering a manifold, okay? So, and from there, you get the nerve lemma. And so there was a paper in 2008, quite an early paper by Karina Koto, Vladimir Itskov, and they said, okay, so let's look at how, you know, which plate cells fire simultaneously and see if we can deduce the topology of the environment a rat is exploring. So that was quite an unusual kind of way in which different mathematics can come into the field, not just the statistical learning theory. So that was quite, that's something that actually inspired me to change field. So I just thought that was, there may be more things like this from other fields of mathematics, and because we don't talk to each other too much, that might be fruitful. And something I'm hoping to see in the next few years.
Thank you. Christoph, would you also like to address this question, or?
Yeah, maybe from a different viewpoint. So I think these computational models and these neural network models are also I think, a very good way of integrating the, well, now massive amounts of data we get. I think without like putting them into models and see what works and what doesn't, it's very hard to make sense of big amounts of data, right? And that works on different levels. So for example, these I think these more biophysically and anatomically detailed models, they can really then, well, easily it's not that easy, but they can tell you well, how these massive amounts of data you get from, let's say, the neuropixel probes and everything, how that works. And the good thing there is that you have always kind of access to all your variables, which you don't have in the experimental setting. You can try, you can do whatever you like in a sense, and then make predictions and test your hypothesis, and then go back. And I think it's very important that you always have this loop of computational model experiment going back and forth.
If I can just add to that, I think that's exciting and has been established over the last decades or two, that most people are getting on board with this idea that you can, as someone who does experiments, you can use models to learn some more what your next experiment might be, and the other way around. If you do models, you should be very involved with what kind of experiments might be done. But I think also that there might still be a step more where we're taking now more of this computation into the lab and do it kind of online. And I'm still quite excited about this, even though it's been coming for a long time, this whole dynamic clamp idea, where you can insert computationally ion channels into a membrane originally. So there was a model, Hodgkin-Huxley type conduct space model of an ion channel, and you would simulate it and then inject the current that would be produced by a channel like that in the cell. And we could see that dynamically it was no difference whether the channel was there or it was artificially injected. That kind of idea has been around for a long time now, but I guess it comes to its own, or I would hope so, in the future, where we can connect whole brain models with whole brains, where we can scale this up, and it's not a single channel in a single cell, but it's going to be at least a structure, brain structure, and the brain structure model. And people are working on this. There's this all optical dynamic clamp that people are now working on, where it's not a single electrode inserted into a single cell, but where it's imaging a whole region with voltage sensitive dyes and then exciting the whole region with light and optogenetics. So I think there's some really exciting stuff happening on that front, where we go one step further. So it's not model, then experiments, then model, but it's all at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So very, very exciting perspectives, very, very interesting goals. And we've already touched a bit upon this, but now I would also like to more specifically ask you, with these goals in mind, how do we actually get there? So what would you think would be the most promising approaches in achieving what we set out to do, and what should we be paying attention to in terms of research directions?
Yeah, I mean, I think systems approaches should be mandatory where you do the models and the experiments, and that has, of course, implications also for what we as researchers are trained in. So ideally we would all have a bit of knowledge on both sides of this divide, and it shouldn't be a divide any longer. And I think that will stay very important going forward. But I'm very excited about all the new imaging techniques that are coming out, and the opportunities are there. We can see much more at the same time, and that's important, of course, because we need the temporal structure of things as well as the correlations spatially. So if you can't record for many units at the same time, you're not having much insights into what's happening. So I think there's lots of opportunities coming our way from there, and these things need to be pursued, and we need to keep going. Maybe not too naively thinking next year we know everything. It's not going to happen. Even if we had all the measurements of the world, we still would need to make sense of it, which is also a really hard problem. So I don't think one should expect too much immediately, but it's going in the right direction there, where we are getting at a at the cusp of getting a more complete image of what's going on. I think that's the exciting bit.
Yeah, maybe to add to that. So yeah, I agree with that. But I think something that well, maybe is lacking a bit or hasn't received enough attention is like theory, in my view. And well, maybe that, I don't know, I mean, because of the like all the deep neural networks, machine learning coming into the field, there's a lot of computational stuff going on. There's a lot of experimental stuff, but I think from the like really a theoretical point, so I don't know, what are the computations performed in the brain? What are the algorithms? I think it's lacking a bit. Maybe also depends a bit on the, I don't know, the way the science system works, that you have to, well, publish a lot to stay in, and maybe the time to like really map out the theory isn't there. I don't know.
Also, I think, yeah, it's like, you know, theories of deep learning is not fully understood either. It's like machine learning on blindness on one side, also blindness on both sides, and like a very engineering approach of let's put this together, let's, you know, for whatever reason, see if it works. It seems to work. Let's publish it. That's fine. Okay, that's fine on some level, but yeah, there is so many things we don't really understand. Why, you know, there's not these deep theoretical questions like, is one hidden layer enough to represent everything? These kinds of questions, like, they're not being asked on the theory is lagging behind very much practice. That's all I want to say. Like, so yeah. You know, you get those classic theorems from the 80s, like Chivenko's theorem, saying that, oh, that probably stopped the whole field then, right? Well, I wouldn't say that, but you know, so yeah, I mean, it's difficult to say. Also, if you have lots of data, if you have a precise biophysical model and you have all these hundreds of billions of neurons, well, you're just recreating what's already there. Are you actually adding to understanding necessarily? So that's why I do think theory is important. I mean, yeah, I of course agree that, you know, more and more tools for experimental you know, observation is useful and should be welcomed, but also at the same time, you know, even if we, I don't know, put some brain in silico, yeah, the understanding won't necessarily stem from just putting the components together. So yeah, there's very much a need of theory.
Absolutely, but well, I think building these models also gives you, so the way of getting to the full model of the brain will, I think, teach you something about how it works. And also, as I said before, having such a model with the capability of changing every parameter, which you don't have in the experiments, would also be nice. But of course, that doesn't mean you understand it just by having it or creating it. Yeah. So
yeah, I think we're also touching on a very interesting fundamental point here, and that's the question whether there is such a thing as a theory behind the brain, because we don't know this for sure. I mean, we know it works, of course. But it's an evolved system, and we know from smaller evolved systems that they're not necessarily explainable in any so smaller way, in any kind of reduced way from what they are. Not necessarily. So if you think about these experiments that people have done with CTRNNs, these continuous time recurrent neural networks of just 3 neurons, and they would evolve them to run a robot around, and they would find solutions that did quite, you know, somewhat complex tasks. And then they looked at, it was not 3 neurons. They looked at what the 3 neurons, how they were connected and what they were doing. And there wasn't really a simpler description than the 3 neurons and what they were doing. There wasn't a kind of principle how it worked or something simple. Now, extrapolated to the human brain, maybe, I just want to put it out there, even though I hope it's not the case, it could well be that there isn't actually a simple principle explaining how those 86 billion neurons do it. Yeah, it's just the most simple description is to the system itself. If that was the case, it's a bit on a hopeless task here, but I just want to throw it out there that it is a possibility, right? I don't know what you think.
Are we going to hit upon integrated information theory and various other well, I don't say it's controversy, but, you know, I think it's perfectly okay to think about mathematical theories that, you know, based on the Aristotelian notion of the whole is not the sum of its parts, or I think it's a very interesting way of quantifying consciousness. It's the first attempt. I wouldn't be so negative about it. I know there's been a huge, I don't know how many people signed a letter recently about that was slightly, I don't know, maybe a bit too negative in my opinion. But I think these approaches should be, you know, not taken too seriously as, you know, well, I'm not saying not taken too seriously, but we have to attack these questions from all sides. And, you know, I have seen formulations of integrated information theory that is more mathematically defined and, say, you know, based on even category theory. There are sort of a whole new ways of thinking about this. So, I mean, yeah, ultimately, what does understand actually mean? You know, I guess that's, you end up at philosophy. What does it mean to that we've understood it? We can put something together and it works. Is that enough? We've put ourselves together and it works, or we can evolve a brain and it works. We know how to do that. We know how to evolve a new artificial species. I guess there is, yeah, that's a new kind of thing.
Well, I fully agree that you know, we should just at least try, right? And then we can see how far we can get. And I personally, I'm still optimistic that there are certain rules, for lack of other words, or laws, or maybe algorithms that can be identified how certain things work. And we already know in the visual system, the idea of a convolution, it is very close to what's happening in the visual system. And so there is a reduction there. So we don't have to build a whole retina to describe, you know, some structure of what is happening in there. So I'm not actually as pessimistic as I made out earlier, but I thought I throw it out there, you know, to get the discussion going. We don't really know where on the range of explainability we are. I mean, something we know is explainable in more concise terms than rebuilding it, but with other things we're not so sure. And integrated information theory for the whole processing that happens in the brain, that's quite controversial, I'd say. Whereas convolutions as a description of some aspects of how the retina works, I think is less controversial, maybe.
Yeah, and I also think, well, let's integrate a few things up now for once, like maybe sensory integration is also a problem that is, still needs to be tackled right now, like multimodal sensory input. How does the brain deal with that? At the moment, I think it's still, maybe there are some papers that tackle multiple different sensory kind of inputs and things at the moment, but having it done so efficiently with a 20-watt system still hasn't happened. You know?
I also think that, like, from a, like, again, psychiatry or the perspective of psychiatric or neurological disorders, I think we wouldn't need a full understanding of how the brain works, but if we knew, like, if we knew something like changing this and that, well, that alleviates these symptoms, that like just making the lives of the patients better. For that, you don't need like a full understanding. You just need like a mid-level, understanding, right? So
a bit of an understanding of cause and effect. Certain interventions would already help a lot, right?
I have to mention, this is the first time when I'm hearing someone with a background in physics expressing doubt about whether the brain can be reduced to first principles or not. So it's very refreshing. Yeah, and definitely very, very interesting points that have been touched upon. We also have another question from the audience that I think we might address now, and then we continue. So Catalina is asking whether you can discuss about the potential for neural rehabilitation and neuroplasticity in enabling individuals with motor disabilities to regain or improve their motor function and mobility. So this is perhaps more of a practical question in this context.
Yeah, where shall we start? I mean, maybe just to fill in some basics, we do know that the brain itself, at least, is extremely plastic, and you can retrain almost any brain region to do almost anything, it seems. I'm always surprised that there are these images, and you can Google them on the internet, where people have lived with basically 80% of their brain not present, and they have lived comparatively normal lives. So I think if it's a question of a damage to a certain brain area that is causing a motor deficit, and there was a connection of different brain areas to available, then it would relearn things. There's this whole story about on the sensory side of people who are blind using the visual cortex for hearing and so on. So I do think there's loads of possibility there. There's indicators that there are possibilities, but then of course there might be other damage that's irreversible. I mean, simply if the spinal cord is severe, then just by retraining that, there wouldn't be any rehabilitation possible, obviously. Even though some people are trying, I think, to regrow nerves, so using techniques with stem cells and so on. But I'm absolutely no expert in this area, so I'd rather not make a fool of myself trying to describe that.
And I think there has also been some progress on like reopening these critical windows for plasticity over the last years, right? So because, well, during development, there are these certain windows where you are, well, where things are more plastic than later on. And I think in this rehabilitation, that would also probably help a lot when you can like just turn a knob, so to speak, and increase the plasticity, speed up that rehabilitation process, this relearning process. And yeah, but I'm also not an expert, but I think there has been some progress over the last couple of years in that regard. Yeah.
So anyway, I just like to add that, okay, so opening up, plasticity, there are new treatments with, for instance, with depression, with LSD or psilocybin. They say that could encourage increased plasticity in the ways, a depressed brain ends up in a particular state, it gets stuck in that state, and apparently these drugs like psilocybin and LSD allow a kind of plasticity that the brain normally doesn't explore during its usual modus operandi, or perhaps a kind of stuck situation that people end up in. So that's one thing that I've come across. Another thing is things like deep brain stimulation. And that is sometimes used for certain types of problems with areas of the brain, such as the thalamus. So you mentioned motor problems. So this hits on a bit of a personal thing with me. My mother suffered a horrendous stroke and she passed away this year, but her stroke was in the thalamus on both sides, bilateral. And now that led to no paralysis whatsoever, but it led to severe problems with accessing memories. So it's like as though she was living 50 years of her life all at once. And sometimes she couldn't access some memories and sometimes she could. So I do think that rehabilitation for damage to brain parts that are perhaps more fundamental, such as the thalamus, which is, at the simplest level, a kind of relay station from your senses and to the cortex, and then from signals from the cortex back out, or everywhere else. These things, therapies for that need to be established and looked at, and that is an immense challenge that lies ahead. Because I think, motor tasks, things are more promising for that, especially if perhaps certain more fundamental brain areas haven't been damaged. So it's all to do with which bits of the brain have been damaged as well, which combinations, and can such a structure be, put back together somehow, or helped or trained to be usable again. And as I discovered through personal experience, unfortunately, the medical establishment seemed to be very either uninterested or conservative in the way they try to tackle these things. So that would be something I would like to advocate for, is more neuroscience informed methods of rehabilitation in hospital practices. Because my mother was in London at one of the what you'd think would be a great place for treating stroke, and everything seemed, all the rehabilitation seemed to be for a one-size-fits-all kind of model. We're not going to bother. She's not waking up. So that, how do you tackle that? Someone who doesn't wake up. And how do you train a brain to start being able to wake up again? Rehabilitation for that. So there's a whole set of disorders called, well, it's not just, you don't just have vegetative states, you have minimally conscious states, which is a level above that. And then it just means to what extent, and then there are people who are completely conscious and can think on a very high level, but are completely locked in. So that's another thing. So there are all these very interesting states that arise from either traumatic brain injury or stroke. And there's a lot of work to be done on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there are also some interesting things coming out in this space, where people have worked with advanced methods to find better ways of finding out what state patients are in. So a colleague of mine, Anil Seth, is working a lot on this in this area, where they're looking at EEG and they using something like integrative information theory, believe it or not.
Yes,
and similar methods, but they are able to predict the clinical assessments from the EEG. And can tell what state the patients are in, and that's the first important step, right? So it is extremely important to know whether it's a vegetative state or whether they're actually just locked in and fully conscious. And there's so I feel there's a lot actually happening in that space that's quite exciting, and it's using modern computational methods and mathematical ideas, looking at different causality measures like Granger causality, transfer entropy, and so on these time series they get from the EEG to learn whether there's consciousness or not. And I think so it certainly, from your experience, it seems to not have filtered down into clinical practice at all, but there are kind of glimmers of hope that something can be done at least, and to improve on the situation today.
I do wonder if I have heard of Tononi trying to use integrated information theory, indeed, as you say, to tell which is truly vegetative state and which is sort of locked in state. That's obviously very important. And yes, unfortunately, I think if there are funders, I don't know if this conference is open to, I think funding for these brain injuries and stroke, and this needs to be, I think more money needs to be sent that way. And of course, we haven't touched upon yet other disorders such as dementia or vascular dementia, which can arise from stroke, for instance. And but perhaps things like depression are getting a lot more funding because it affects maybe a larger proportion of people. But I think increasingly with, you know, more people avoiding common diseases and living longer, I think dementia will become a major problem for society, especially if, there are more older people than younger people and the burden of looking after them. So I think we desperately need innovation in that area. It's, of course, it's not my area, dementia research, but I'm just saying it would be something that is important.
I think you also touched on a very important point here, which is the challenge of communicating. You just mentioned now between medical professionals and researchers, and research actually getting passed and being implemented into the clinic, and also earlier the communication between professionals coming from very different fields, or even professionals coming from the same field but who are kind of isolated and don't know about each other. So I would like to ask more generally, do you think this is something that is a very big challenge currently in neuroscience? And what would you see as a way of, what would you see would be the way to address this and to kind of bridge these gaps that I think exist there nowadays?
Well, I mean, first of all, I agree that there is a bit of a problem where it's not easy to communicate at times or to share things when experts are in certain silos. So in our case, we are all kind of having this computational, mathematical, physics background. We might be talking the same language, but that's not a given. No? This is actually maybe a bit unusual, because normally you would think neuroscience would be filled with neuroscientists who come through some sort of degree of neuroscience. So there is an issue potentially, but I think in the end of the day, just also because computational things are, in my mind, quite important for the progress of the field, what we need is more education, I think, where a new generation of neuroscientists will all have some computational, some experimental, some fundamental education, and then will be better equipped to talk to each other from the get-go, and understand others' approaches. It's never going to be perfect, and a lot of just patience and talking to each other goes a long way already. But I do think there's a lot to be said about a good education that includes, both sides of the field as important. In terms of
but it's also the other way around, right? So that well, not only like the people, like the experimental neuroscientists need to learn computational methods. I think the other way around is also very important, because you can build a lot of models. When you don't understand the experiments correctly, then your models aren't any good as well, right?
Absolutely, yeah, fully agree. But the third thing is then to get it into practice, and that's maybe something that's not. Well, there might be a communication issue potentially, because of course a medical doctor has yet another different education. But I also think that structurally, at least I personally, I'm not quite in touch with hospitals and or patients automatically if I do neuroscience research. And a lot of people, I think, struggle with that aspect of it. Of course, there are our colleagues who are both medical doctors and neuroscientists. For them, it's easy or easier. For everyone else, I think there is a bit of a divide where medical practice happens in hospitals and the research happens in universities and research institutes, and they just don't connect necessarily.
I agree. Like I wanted to know, can I get onto deep brain stimulation from my mother, please? I've heard of all this, and it falls onto complete deaf ears amongst a bunch of therapists, and there's no obvious way of accessing it, or you go via, okay, are there clinical trials doing this? And that's difficult to find, especially, that's another problem. If it's a rare problem, there's just not going to be clinical trials. And then there's going to be other issues like in the UK, we have something called NICE guidelines. So what the government has approved, or of a set of guidelines that the health system are sort of obliged to follow, and they're reluctant to try something outside of that. And in order to instigate something outside of that, you just have to be a very vociferous kind of activist patient, family member, or maybe you have connections in science and you try your best to get people to help. So there should be maybe channels that can be set up linking clinical practice with more fundamental neuroscience questions, and allow patients to say, or families of patients to say, okay, you know, what help is out there that is still, you know, safe to try. I mean, at some point there is often the case of doctors refusing a drug because my mother might have a heart attack, and you think, well, she's in a minimally conscious state. What will a heart attack? What will be what will be wrong with a heart attack, and things like this. So there are all sorts of ethical questions in there as well that I can understand. The doctor doesn't want to lose his or her license or whatever, because yes, you nevertheless caused a heart attack. But you know,
but I was about to say, I think these regulations, of course, are in place for a reason, and you wouldn't want to have just any neuroscientist try any kind of theory on patients without a bit of testing and security in the background, right? So, so there are difficult questions. It's not, and I would personally never say that there's some unwillingness on one side or the other. It's actually just not an easy field to navigate in. Mainly also, you said, okay, the medics are refusing, but I think also, well, they've been trained 20 years ago, whenever they were trained, and they don't have any time to kind of catch up necessarily. So
time or money, yes, and time in their daily practice as well. That's true. They often very overworked, and so there is that issue coming in as well.
So there are difficult issues there, no, for sure. And you don't have easy solutions potentially. More money is always welcome, obviously. Yeah, so you could also
that would be an easy solution. Yeah,
well, because of course your medics can also do CPD, like a continuous learning, and could go onto a course of modern neuroscience if they had the time and the money to do it, right? In principle.
Yeah, very much agreed.
Yeah, so it's, difficult questions there.
Yeah, definitely. Coming back to the question of challenges, though, is there something else that you would perhaps like to add, something that you consider is something urgent that needs to be addressed by the field?
Well, there are the usual suspects, of course, that maybe also should be mentioned. We already touched upon it a little bit, but if you look at the scientific model as a whole and the pressure to publish and the inability to publish negative results and this entire area of problematic issues, then it affects neuroscience as any other field, but maybe even more so because it's a bit of more hot field, if you want, right? So if everyone shoots for the prestigious journal and needs to make a nice story of everything, then facts get distorted or made up in a sense, where you kind of frame everything into something that sounds very logical so that it can get into that, nice journal and be kind of on the front cover because it's such a nice story. That isn't always helpful for progress. And I think a lot of work needs to be done generally in science, but specifically also in neuroscience, to get to more honest reporting of what the findings are. And then also the ability to report failures and say, well, this is what doesn't work, so no one has to repeat it again, which today is still almost impossible. And then also, of course, the being strict with oneself. So I think there's still a lot of wrangling with statistics going on. That's quite unfortunate and will lead to these reproducibility problems that we all know.
I think, I mean, touching upon how people are funded, I guess you do need those publications to get further funding, and so people rely on that. So I did hear of some radical suggestions that everyone gets a universal kind of, not a very high level of funding, but at least something that you don't need to apply for. You don't have to spend a lot of time trying to apply for that. So a lot of time nowadays is taken by people just writing grants and getting that reviewed n times, right? So having a universal grant system, if a different country, I don't think the UK will go there, but if different countries want to try that as a radical way of making sure that a diverse range of scientists get to do something with their ideas, at least. And then, of course, there could be grants on top of that that can be done in addition. I think that would be an interesting approach that the government could consider.
Yeah,
well, I think that oh, sorry.
No,
I think that was the case in many countries, like I don't know, 40, 50 years ago, right? That there was a high basic funding, and you got your, I don't know, professorship or so, and then you had money for PhD students and postdocs to work on things, and you hadn't, there wasn't a need to apply for a lot of these grants. And well, I think that going back to such a system where you just like fund people that, well, have shown that they're capable of doing research, it would be much better, because it, as you said, it would remove all these, well, this need to write grants. Lots of time you put into writing grants. These grants have to be reviewed by someone. They put a lot of time in there, and then most of them get rejected. So you put a lot of time into something, and most of the time you don't have anything from it. So
yeah, definitely.
But I think maybe one last comment to that. I think the only problem there is that through all these like funding, like grant schemes, I think the government can, well, kind of give the way of, like, we give a lot of money to this field now or to this area, so they can steer a bit where the research goes. And if you just provide basic funding for everyone, you kind of can't do that anymore, right? So I think that's why there seems to be some reluctance from the government side.
I think you could still give the basic and then have the additional incentive to steer if you feel like it. I mean, I do feel strongly about at least some of the, some of this kind of, I guess I bet it just slows down science, like lots of time spent writing these proposals, reviewing other people's ones, and it must take a lot. I mean, I bet the amount saved by accidentally giving someone a grant who doesn't produce anything, is that going to be more than the cost of
totally agree.
And all the other side effects, right, that we said, so all this incentive with the big journals and whatnot to build that CV that you can then have that, and that seems to put the wrong emphasis onto just incentives, how to behave as a scientist, that we don't want. Ideally, we would want always to be most honest with our results and not make them look the best, as we now often push to do.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I fully agree with this, and I can only hope that it will change sooner rather than later. But yeah, change in academia isn't always so fast. So I guess we'll see how it goes. Thank you very much for these points. We have one final question from the audience. That is from Catalina, and she's asking, what about the potential impact of neuroimaging techniques in understanding the neural basis of mental health disorders such as depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder? And how could this knowledge inform therapeutic approaches?
yeah, well, I personally think there's a lot of potential for neuroimaging generally, and the better it gets, the more we can learn. So I do think we will learn more about what is different in different mental health conditions, and then whether that leads directly to any kinds of treatments, that's maybe different questions, but at least it would lead to a lot more understanding. So I think it's uncontroversial to say that the better we can look, the more we can learn. I mean, but Christoph, you work more with disorders than I do.
Well, I totally agree. I think neuroimaging has already been applied very successfully in these types of conditions, right? And I think nowadays they're complemented with other measurement techniques that kind of like more electrophysiological approaches, EEG, MEG, that kind of have complementary advantages and disadvantages. And I think that's basically what we will do even more in the future, and also kind of understanding the basis of these neuroimaging signals better and resolving them. Like nowadays you can do 7 Tesla fMRI, where you can resolve the supragranular layer and the infragranular layer contributions and things like that. And I think that will really help us, because right now I think the methods are very good for looking at large-scale systems, but to look at, well, the actual computations in the layered cortex, they're still too coarse. But I think we're getting there, and when we're then adding like the temporal resolution of things like EEG or MEG, I think that will become a big field and give us a much deeper understanding in the future.
Yeah, I think the challenge is to sort of, I don't know if we have at the moment very good ways of, okay, yeah, brain injury you can detect on an MRI scan, you know the extent, but things like subtle diseases like schizophrenia, you know, can you tell if this scan is the brain of a schizophrenic patient or control? It's not such an easy question. It's actually one of the questions I'm trying to tackle at the moment with some topology. So it's hopefully to be able to, you know, better diagnose from individual scans, not just be able to detect things on group level. That's quite an important challenge. And I guess the challenge is due to, you can't really stick too many things into human brains the way you can with animals. Like you can't stick in massive probes that can measure thousands of neurons. You know, we are stuck with fMRI, which, you know, neurons function on the millisecond scale, whereas fMRI in the blood flow, it's, you know, 2 seconds to 6 seconds, where things have sort of, you know, if there's lots of neuroactivity and millions of neurons in one region, then yes, the blood flow will increase, and then you see that on a 6 second to 10 second kind of time scale. So yeah, for humans, we're kind of a little bit, you know, we do need more innovation there. You know, and then there are questions about what can you deduce from things that are inevitably averaged over voxels, right? You can't have that fine level of representation. It's just not available to you. So you can only hope, hopefully the neural code is also sort of smooth in this way and this averaging doesn't matter or something like that, but it might matter. And we don't have detailed enough tools, I feel, to look into human patients yet on an individual level, perhaps complemented with more advanced genetic techniques to look at. I don't know how much blood tests can give you, but that might be, you might need to look at combinations of that.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you would like to add to this? If anyone would.
Yeah, I mean, just the just to recall that, yeah, maybe models can help a little bit with it, but we shall find out. I mean, it's not a fix it all, but I'm just thinking if you were able to make a microscopic model that reproduces your macroscopic average data, isn't the proof that that's what's happening underneath, but on the other hand, is also better than knowing nothing. So maybe there's something that could be done there.
Very true. Yes, yes, that's a very important point that I also agree with. Yes.
Yeah. All right, so we are currently a little bit over time, but perhaps just to end with a positive, fun view towards the future, I would like to ask you if very briefly you could tell us what would be your kind of off-the-cuff, half-crazy prediction for what's to come in neuroscience in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
Asking the hard questions.
Yeah. Speaking of balls from the left field, yeah. Yeah, it's hard. It's obviously all predictions will be wrong to start with, but I think a lot will happen with this kind of digital twin type of idea, where there are people now trying to make brain models that are specific to certain people, and then trying to learn something about the condition of their brain from the individual model. So going away from having the average model of the average human brain towards having more specific models of brains, of course, also in animal models potentially. And I think more will happen in that space, and I hope it will be very beneficial.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that that's also something that's been happening in the computational psychiatry a lot. So people have tried to integrate personal, let's say, genetic information into kinds of models, and I don't know, expression of let's say ion channel or synaptic receptor proteins and things like that. And I mean, one maybe grim prediction would be that the deep learning, machine learning, that's coming into the field, will dominate the field, which I think wouldn't be the best future. I mean, there's obviously a lot that we can learn from them, and that we can techniques.
I thought you were about to predict the singularity, but that's okay.
That's for later.
We need 15 years for that. All right.
Yeah.
Shabnam, you want to give one?
I don't know. I think it's too difficult to say. There are these innovations with these small, what are they called? I'm sort of lost for the words for these sort of micro brains that people are making that are not really
the brain organoids.
Yes, those things. So that seems to be a very promising new way of approaching things. And then there's also Michael Levin's these new organisms that he's built up through. Okay, so you use like frog cells that are usually used for the skin, and then you can make a new organism coming out of that. That seems like an interesting kind of innovation in science alone, that saying, okay, we've created from the cells of one organism that has evolved the usual way, frogs, and we've somehow created not quite life, but something that is doing some of the aspects of life, like it's figured out a way to reproduce itself by coiling up these little blobs. What are these called? Okay, but Michael Levin. So, and then, yeah. So I think there could be there are some more interesting techniques that are coming up that we're not really that neuroscientists are not necessarily focusing on, that might change things in dramatic ways. But that's just
very exciting things ahead. Also, some of them may be a bit terrifying, but we'll see how it goes. I would like to thank you all three again for this wonderful and engaging discussion, for being with us here today. It's been really nice having you, and I hope you also had a good time.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting us.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for inviting us. Yes.
Thank you. And I would also like to thank our audience for their time and for their engagement, for being with us throughout the entire day. I can't imagine that was easy. It was a pretty long day. I also hope they had a good time with us. And before we conclude for today, final thing, I would like to thank all of our partners that have made this conference possible, and I will now list them. This is Societatea Studenților în Medicină din București and Ștefana Geavu, Philos, Asociația Studenților la Filozofie, and also to Baranov Alexandru Robert, Psychologies, and to Clementina Anghelache, Solver and Alice Petrescu, ASB and Răzvan Mateescu, FutureSci and their team, Silvia Bântu, Ioana Vasiu, Mihaela Alecu, Alexandru Păunescu, Mihaela Ilie, Marina Onuță, Universitatea Politehnică, Facultatea de Calculatoare and Alin Moldoveanu, USH and Dragoș Cârneci, Loredana Bănică, Cognosis, Alexandra Cimpoieru, the University of Bucharest, Facultatea de Psihologie, Dragoș Ilescu, Clinica Emerald, and finally, but last but not least, Anca Fodulu. Thank you also to all of our friends and our supporters, the people who are here today. Thank you again. And with that being said, it's my pleasure to conclude the first day of Neurocon 23. And we look forward to seeing everyone tomorrow at 10 a.m. Local Bucharest time. Thank you again, and I wish you all a very pleasant evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.